Jenny Taylor. I'm from Read for Africa. I started my company in the year 2000. I was actually working in the UK in 98 and 99, and I only had a physical education and psychology background. So I was actually a qualified physical education teacher, and all of the work that I had been doing as a student was working with children and adults with physical and intellectual disabilities. What I'd noticed was really that children with the behavioural problems actually couldn't read, and so they were playing up because of their lack of being able to read. And I researched different ways of teaching reading, and I came across the Phono-Graphics reading method. And the developers had designed the program in America at a company called Read America. And it got me really excited because they were going to be in London while I was there. And as a result, I followed up with them and I actually did their course. They got excited about Africa. They sponsored a lot of their resources. And that's really where the journey started, because I came back to South Africa and started Read for Africa with the idea that children would be reading for Africa. And I did my master's in adult education, where I explored phonographics in a South African context. And basically I've spent the last 18 years training teachers on how to use the method and showing parents and teachers that anyone can learn to read. And basically there are two schools of thought. You have your phonics programs, which is a bottom-up approach. It starts with the smallest units of sound, and you literally learn every letter and letter combination before you've ever even been exposed to a real word. And then you have a whole language approach where you start at the top and work your way down. So a whole language approach would be starting with the whole language, working down to actual whole words, and slowly and eventually getting down to the actual phonetics. And so neither of these schools of thought have actually been fully successful. And if you look at our curriculum today, they try and combine those two processes. And this is really where I feel the challenge is that schools are not standardized. They're not choosing one particular methodology, so that the grade R's to grade 1 to grade 3, all the way up to grade 7, are following the same methodology from right through the school. So the focus is really on illiteracy in the media, the fact that so many children can't read. But we also have a problem of illiteracy in our country and globally really, where children read easily, but they're not interested in reading. There are too many other distractions. You've got gadgets, you've got PlayStation, you've got all kinds of games. And so children are not developing an interest in reading, a love for reading. Their spelling is affected because you can't have a good spelling if you haven't read the word sufficiently and built up your visual memory. In South Africa, we have the added complication of being in a multilingual society. It's very exciting to be in a multicultural and multilingual society, but it does bring extra issues in terms of learning to read. And I'm a strong advocate that children should learn how to read in their mother tongue. However, in a country like South Africa, what is one's mother tongue is a question that's always asked. Because in many cases, you have a mother who speaks one of the languages, such as Sotho, and the father speaks Zulu. So is your mother tongue really the language of your mother, or is it the language that you hear the most often? Is it the language that you were brought up with, but you moved from a rural area into the city, and now suddenly you're at a school that doesn't provide that particular, or doesn't teach in that particular language, and so you end up having a third or fourth language being the language that you are learning to read in. And also in South Africa and in the world, people are often more motivated to learn how to read in English. So we have a situation where children's mother tongue is not actually consolidated sufficiently. They might start to learn how to read in a particular language, then go to a different school. So there are various challenges. And really, what's really difficult in all the township schools that I work with is that children are only exposed to English in their second year, well, in grade 2. And by the end of grade 3, they're expected to be completely fluent and proficient in English, and are then expected by the time they get to grade 4 to be able to do all of their learning areas in English. And they're expected to be on a par with their English-speaking peers. So when we talk about teaching reading, and the curriculum specifies the different areas of phonics, listening and speaking, reading and writing, often people see that it needs to, or teachers see that it needs to be taught in isolation, and it really doesn't. There's a whole part in the curriculum where it focuses on integrated literacy, and that's what we need to be doing more. because the only reason why we want children to read and spell is to be able to use that information that they're reading. There's never ever going to be a need for any child to be able to read individual letters or even individual words. But yet the first 3 years are so focused on teaching isolated letters and isolated words. So our approach to teaching reading, the Phono-Graphics reading method, actually takes all of these things into consideration. We don't teach the alphabet letters in isolation as a pre-literacy skill. The alphabet actually has absolutely nothing to do with reading. Everyone thinks it does, but if you go back in history, you will see that the alphabet never existed. Slowly, the writing systems were developed. People were designing writing systems based on our spoken language. There was no such thing as the alphabet. Only hundreds of years later did people start sorting words and things into alphabetical order. So the misconception that the alphabet is significant when learning how to read, it's not accurate. Obviously, every child has to know the alphabet. We do need to teach the alphabet, but it's the order in which we do it. So our approach to teaching reading is focusing on the sounds in the context of actual words. So right from the first day that you learn how to read, we would teach you a word like cat, where we focus on the sounds, but we hear the k, at into the word cat. We never talk about a k for cat, a for apple, where children then only associate those words with that particular letter. We really focus on teaching reading in the context for which it was intended, and that's to read and spell entire words. There really are just 4 basic principles about the English language that parents, children and teachers need to understand. The first thing that we need to understand is that letters are pictures of sound. So the word phonographics, phonetics, phonics all talks about the fact that letters are pictures of sound. And what we mean by that is that literally that's a picture for k, that is a picture for a, and that is a picture for t. These are just pictures. The second concept that we need to understand is the fact that some sound pictures have more than one letter. We wish that the language stayed as simple as that, but we also need to be mindful of the fact that you can show letters or sounds can be represented with more than one letter, such as the sh, the ch. And even if we got more complicated, that whole picture is one picture for the A sound, for example. The third thing about the English language is the fact that there is variation. And that's what catches all of us in terms of spelling. And you'll often hear adults complaining about the fact that the English language is so complicated, that there are so many different ways to show each sound. But it doesn't have to be that difficult, because at least it's consistent. So for example, all of these pictures might look different, but they actually all represent the same sound. All of these are pictures of the O sound. So it doesn't matter what word they're in, whether you see that in boat, you can hear that it's an O. You can see that in blow, and you can also hear that it's an O. There are lots of different ways to show each sound. And just as I've convinced you that that is a picture for O in blow, show, grow, you might ask about a word that looks like this. Suddenly, this picture now represents the ow sound. So little children working on their own might go k-o, ko, and not understand what it means. And so we also have to understand the concept of overlap, where some sound pictures can represent different sounds in different contexts. So in this word, this is a picture for ow, but in this word, it's a picture for o. And it's also the case when you're dealing with a word like a place in the UK, and some people might read it as reading. They're going to the reading university, when actually, just by changing that from the E sound to the E sound, it's actually Reading University. And so when we read, we have to be able to know these things so that we're not always reading weapons of mass destruction. We know to change it to weapons of mass destruction. And there's overlap between the different languages as well. So you will hear an English-speaking person saying this name as SIFO, and then people will laugh, because basically in English this is most commonly a picture for the f sound. So English speakers see this word for the first time and they go SIFO, SIFO. And so actually when you see in Zulu, that combination actually represents a p sound. So we need to change it and say SIPO. A question that parents and teachers always ask is, how is it possible to learn how to read without knowing the alphabet? And so I'm going to show you how we go about teaching reading by just focusing on the sounds and the letters that represent those sounds. And we've got Buchle with us today, and she's going to help us. So we're going to build a word, and the first word we're going to build is the word cat. So Buchle, what is the first sound you hear in cat? Good. Do you know which one of these is the picture book? Yes. Show me. Excellent. What is the next sound you hear in cat? Good. And where is the a? Lovely. And what is the last sound you hear in cat? Great. And where's that? Excellent. Okay. Put your finger over there and say each sound for me. What is that? Perfect. Cat. You wanted to say cat. Excellent. Okay. Now, the next word we're going to build is the word cap. So, what is the first sound you hear in cap? Good. And where is that? Nice. What is the next sound you hear in cap? Show me. Great. And what is the last sound in cap? Excellent. And where's that? Perfect. Okay, put your finger there. Say each sound. Brilliant. All right, so now we've built a few words. Now we're going to spell some of them again, except this time you're going to have to choose from more letters. So you're going to have to decide which one of these pictures you're going to use. And we'll do the first one together. So we'll spell the word pot. Okay. What is the first sound you hear in pot? Good. And where is that? Lovely. What is the next sound you hear in pot? And where's that? Third. And the last sound in pot? Great. Show me. Excellent. Okay. Now, if this word says pot, I want you to change it into cot. What do you think you need to do? Okay, so do that for me. So you're taking out the p, and what are you going to put in its place? Excellent. Now, if that word says cot, I want you to change it into cat. What do you think you must do? Okay, so do that for me. And what are you going to put there to make it say cat? Good. Lovely. If that word says cat, I want you to change it into cap. Okay, do that for me. And what are you going to put there? Good. Okay, so k-ap, cap. All right. So now I want you to read a slightly longer word for me. If I gave you this word, what does this word say?
Desk.
Desk. Okay, good. Tell me the sounds you hear in desk.
A d,
D,
an e, an s, and a p.
Excellent. If I took that out, what word would you be left with? It sometimes doesn't make sense. It's not an actual word.
Deck.
Deck. Excellent. If I took that out, what are you left with?
Ek.
Don't forget that.
Esk.
S. Okay. So that's really good. Now we're going to do something almost the same, except you're not going to see the letters. So now, if I ask you to tell me the sounds you hear in plum, put your finger over there and tell me the sounds. You can put it higher. What's the first sound you hear in plum?
P.
Mm-hmm.
And a L. And a E. And a M.
Okay, that would be plan. So when my finger is over here, so if we do this, P, L, what sound do you hear over here in plum? P, L. Is two sounds. What's the first sound in
It's an A.
Listen. What's that sound?
An A. A U.
Okay, in English, so good, okay. But we don't say the alphabet, okay. So in the word plum, you hear P, L. Perfect, the and then the M. Good. Now, because you're reading these words so nicely, can I give you a really long word? Okay, so I can show people how we break up very long words, because sometimes when children see a word like this, they panic. Do you think that's too long?
No.
You'll be okay. Okay, so I want you to read up to there first. So say each sound.
D, E, N. Den.
Den, good.
T, I, S, T. Tist.
Now put it together.
Dentist.
Say it as one word.
Dentist.
And what is a dentist?
It's a doctor who looks at your teeth.
Excellent, well done. Brilliant. And I want to read a little story with you. You're going to read a story. Some of the words are going to be, maybe will be a little bit difficult. If you struggle, I'll just point out to you. But it's mainly to show people how, when they get to some of these letters and letter combinations that they don't know, how they can help their own children with it. Okay, so let's read the heading.
Sam in the mud.
Excellent, let's go.
Sam runs and jumps in the mud.
Okay, so just because the heading was mud, the word's actually different. So just read what you can see. Okay, so let's read up to here first. Say each sound.
P, A, D.
What have you got so far?
Pad.
Pud.
L, E.
So put it. That's one sound for L. Okay, so pud. L. Puddle. So Sam runs and jumps in the puddle.
Of mud.
Excellent.
He trips.
That's an I sound.
He trips.
He trips. Do you know what it means to trip?
Yes.
What does it mean?
When you fall.
When you fall. So he trips.
And has a bump.
Good.
Sam got a cut on his head.
Okay. And yes, yeah, good. Okay, so I know you can read that word. That's beautiful. So he got a bump on his hand.
Mom can help. Mom can clean the cut and rub on cream. Sam gets a kiss from Mom.
Not for.
From
From.
Mom. Sam is better. He is well. Sam can jump in the mud and run now.
Excellent. Well done. So when reading with your children, it's important that you don't choose a book or a text that uses a picture that tells the story. Often you'll have a very elaborate picture on the one side with the text, and this picture actually tells the story. And so it's really important that you get children to read every single word and every letter within a word, and you need to break that habit of guessing. So often children will read on their own, they absolutely love it, they'll tell you that they've read 5 books, but as a parent we can't kid ourselves that children are actually reading. So when you're cooking or when you're driving and you have your children read to you, you might think that you are getting through a lot of reading. And so it's more quantity rather than quality, which isn't the best way to go. It's really, really important. And sometimes it might seem a little bit tedious, but you really do need to help children read absolutely every word accurately. The biggest problem with comprehension later, and I see it with university students that I work with, is that children have got a really good memory and they memorize all the words. At some point, and often the problem hits at grade 3, where children can't retain all of that information. And if they don't have the ability to break words up into its sounds, they're not going to be able to read the words. Medical students at university who got 6 or 7 distinctions at school, but they actually can't read. And so they are failing first year university because you only have a photographic memory of what you have read. So now when learners or students are being exposed to completely new texts, they're not actually able to read. And it all starts here, where clever children who can make inferences, who can draw conclusions from the pictures, can predict the story, they are the ones who actually have comprehension problems later because they misread the question. They read what they think they can see, and that's where the problem lies. So buddy reading, where you are actually helping the child, is crucial. We never read for the learner. We generally try and point out a particular word. So if a child can't read the word clean, for example, we wouldn't tell them that the word is clean. We would just point out the picture for the E sound and hope that the child self-corrects. So self-correction is also really important. They need to be able to read from the context and realize, but that word doesn't make sense in that context, and then be able to move from there. Along the way, when children mispronounce words slightly, it could also change the meaning of the word completely. So to stop and pause, to ask a few questions, to make sure that the child is understanding what they are reading. It won't be fun if they're just reading a whole lot of words, but also that's where you break the habit, or you instill good reading habits right from the start. Teaching your child to read might seem like a very daunting experience, but it actually can be a lot of fun. A lot of parents are intimidated by the English language themselves, especially if English isn't their first language. We all speak about our own spelling issues and we're all grateful for spell check. So often parents will complain about the fact that the English language is so difficult, but really it's also about having a lot of fun. And if you break it down to its simplest form and you integrate some of the tips and you really just always focus on the fact that letters are pictures of sound, you can have a lot of fun with your kids. It's very exciting that being able to go from building a word like cat and cot and pot, and slowly as you progress through the English language, that very quickly children are able to read words like plastic and dentist and fantastic. And if they can understand the basic principles of how the language works, it doesn't matter how difficult the words are. You just continue to apply the same methodology and the same skills and the same strategies. The biggest reason why children hate reading is because they struggle with it. And if you can set aside quality time where you are patient with your children, we also feel that children should read more quickly. We often criticize children because they're reading so slowly and it can be quite laborious and quite boring. But you must just remember that a little bit of practice every day, it'll become a reflex for them. And so you as the parent might be frustrated because they're reading every sound and they're going so slowly, but try and not get too frustrated with the process. If you set aside that quality time, read the books with them, and even if you end up reading to the child for the last few minutes so that their memory of reading that text is a positive one, make sure you discuss the story with them. You're going to open a whole new world for them. You're going to discuss stories and places and adventures that they've never heard about before. So it actually can be one of the most beautiful times that you will ever have with your child. You just need to maybe take a step back, be a little bit more patient, and realize that it will take a little bit of time.